I'm glad you've joined me here today with this special topic and my special guest. I am interviewing Opal Singleton-Hendershot. She is the president and CEO of Million Kids, and Million Kids is an anti-human trafficking organization. And Opal she actually knows more about this topic than anybody I know, and she has been active, training people, government, law enforcement, the private sector, all throughout America and internationally. And she also has a radio broadcast program that you can catch, and she'll tell us a little bit more about that. But we want to talk about the sobering implications of lax border policies and what happens to our communities as a result. So let me just go ahead and introduce you to Opal at this time. Opal, hello, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Kerry.
It's good to see you again, too. Hey, tell me a little bit, just give me a quick overview of some of the various government agencies that you've trained, law enforcement, and how many people is your estimates on how many people you've reached with this anti-human trafficking message?
I don't know. It's an amazing situation. I never would have dreamed it. But anyway, I've trained somewhere around 750,000 people, and I
Yeah.
am a post-certified law enforcement trainer, meaning that I am past the certification to train law enforcement, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
unique for a civilian. And I did sit on the committee in Sacramento that wrote the human trafficking training for all of law enforcement for the state of California for human trafficking. So I have been involved in it for many years and have tens of thousands of hours of research, but I do handle
Yeah.
and get involved with real cases. So everything I do is about case studies and
Mm-hmm.
examples rather than big numbers that are thrown out there.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people now, and by the way, thank you for your work. I appreciate your tireless efforts to get.
I sometimes say I used to look like the person on the back of my book.
But time has a way of changing things.
Especially in this hard subject, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So so what I would like to do, just in the short time that we have together today, is spend a little bit of time about talking about the implications of the border policies that we've been dealing with over the last few years here in our country, and how that not only has impacted our own local communities, but also has brought an injustice actually on the people who have come into the migrants who have come into America. And just quickly, I want to just kind of us talk a little bit about the difference between human smuggling, and human trafficking, because the cartels are the main players of getting people into America, but the cartels are also the main players about keeping those people who they've brought in the invisible bonds of slavery. Am I correct on that?
Yes, it's a interesting time in history when you start to realize what is happening. A country without a border, by the way, is not going to be a country,
Yeah.
and so this whole philosophy changes everything. Now, I've actually been studying this under three different presidential administrations, but I've never seen it to the point that it is today. There's always been some level of smuggling coming into the U.S., but we
Mm-hmm.
are at outrageous proportions that will change our society forever. And so, to your question, what's the difference between smuggling and trafficking? Trafficking is defined by force, fraud, fear, and coercion. So, in smuggling, you pay a coyote, and that's not a dog, by the way. That's a cartel member. Somebody in the audience one time said, "Are you talking about a dog kind of thing?" No, it's a cartel member, okay?
Yeah.
And you're paying them to be able to break the law and come into the country. So
Hmm.
that is smuggling. At that point, you are not a victim of trafficking. You have broken a law, which is not a popular idea to say that now, but you have, but you're
Yeah.
not a victim of trafficking. What happens though normally is you pay that coyote money, and or your family back home has paid that money. They cross the border and they don't let you go. They say,
Hmm.
I need more money, maybe another 8,000 or 10,000, or I'm going to hurt your family back home. And that's
Yeah.
an important thing to understand. When you get to, I'm going to hurt your family, that is coercion. That's a threat. So you
Hmm.
go from being a criminal and a person smuggled in to being a victim of trafficking if you're being held against your will, if they're threatening you or your family, if they're blackmailing you, force, fraud, fear, or coercion. So many people that get into the US come in legally and they can be trafficked also.
Hmm.
But you are much more likely to be trafficked if you come in without documentation.
Yeah.
And you are absolutely correct in what you're saying is that we have this feeling that if they get on American soil, they're free to go. And we all kind of walk on like that's going to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And I will often say just because they're on American soil does not make them safe. They
No.
are now being victimized in your community, in drop houses, in illegal pot grows, in forced labor kind of thing,
Hmm.
in forced sexual activity. And that is happening even right here in Riverside. Several cases in the last year and a half really show us how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, and this crime and this actually human tragedy, because one of the things, regardless of where people land politically, is that one of the things that what I wanted to help raise awareness about is that this has really perpetrated an injustice on the migrants. It's kind of it's almost like a shell game, because what the message that you hear is that these poor migrants are coming in from countries where they're being exploited, and so we are giving them a safe haven here in America. But the fact of the matter is when they get into America, they still are beholden to the cartels,
Right.
and they never escape that. And just because, like you say, they're on American soil, they're not safe. They now live with this perpetual threat hanging over their head. If they don't do what the cartels want them to do, then their loved ones, friends, or even themselves will suffer.
Yeah, this injustice is on multiple levels that we can talk about, but on the individual here in the US, absolutely it is a very serious matter. What we'll often see, and the one thing I want your audience to really know is
Hmm.
that the number one way that you can tell someone is being exploited is that they won't cooperate because they're afraid of what's going to happen to their
Yeah.
family.
Okay. Exactly.
So, what happens here, so that people understand, is that the family will often negotiate with the cartel down in Mexico or Guatemala or China or wherever they're coming from, and
Hmm.
they will pay that cartel money and thinking they're going to be free to go. But what will happen is once the individual gets here, they will often put them in drop houses. And I want your audience to be able to recognize a drop house so that they can report it. A drop house is within any community. I can show you video after video. They're often in tract homes,
Hmm.
they might
Hmm.
be in trailers, but they will hold a large group of people against their will. 50 people. So one of them I saw in Phoenix was 108 people.
Wow.
Uh, and there were only three women in there with children. The rest were men that they're being held with. These are very vile things that are happening. They're hitting their hands with a hammer. They're raping them. They are, in some cases, they die. They're being tortured. And what is happening is, as a human trafficking advocate here in the U.S., we know how to arrange services for a human trafficking victim. So we can offer them services if we meet them and understand what's happening. But it's a different thing in this case because it isn't the services for them they want. We have no ability to protect their family back home. So they won't
Yeah.
cooperate.
Exactly.
They'll
Yeah.
hear that. I have to do this. They're going to they will torture my family. They will behead them. They will kill them. They will rape my sister. And
Hmm.
so these people are being held in the houses until they come up with more money, and they're being very violated. How to watch for a drop house. Okay, let me give you concrete things that you can do.
Yeah.
Number one, do not go in there yourself, and do not interact. I always say I don't want grandma down at the motel taking on the cartel. This
Yeah.
is serious business. Okay,
Yeah.
but keep an eye. Know your neighborhood. Know every house in your neighborhood. If there's a house that's a rental, find out who the landlord is so you can call them. Did
Hmm.
people all of a sudden move in, but all the windows are closed, or
Yeah.
that everybody's coming and going out of the back of the house, or there's usually
Hmm.
an attached garage where a van goes in late at night, early morning. There may be screws on the outside or nails on the outside of the doors and windows to keep people from
Hmm.
getting. You know, there may be a guard man sitting around up front. This happened in Casablanca, by the way. They
Hmm.
had a pit bull, and it was the animal control that found that. And
Hmm.
so pay attention to your neighborhood. The same thing if there's an illegal pot grow, because you're seeing a lot of people now brought in from China that are being forced into running these illegal pot grows, because when we arrest them, they're going to be the perpetrator. But they're as much a victim as all the others, because they come in and they're forced to live inside an illegal pot grow. And then when they get arrested, they'll be arrested for running an illegal pot grow. So in
Gotcha.
those cases, same kind of thing, not normal family activity. Okay. Everything's closed off. Maybe some electrical wires going out in odd places, a lot of coming and going at night. The same kind of thing with a residential brothel. They'll take an empty house, pull up in a van, and they'll only be there for 4 or 5 hours. A whole bunch of men get out, and it isn't moving trucks. Okay, this is a van with a bunch of men. Okay, if you see that, don't wait and call
Yeah.
code enforcement. Call immediately to your non-emergency number at your law enforcement and say,
Hmm.
activity that is suspicious. My point is, it's happening, and it's happening in real numbers in your community, and this is how you can help. Just pay attention to your neighborhood, but don't get yourself involved. These people play for keeps,
Yeah.
and that's very important to recognize how that all works.
Yeah. You know, and I think that what really drives me nuts, and I suspect it probably drives you nuts so much more than me, is that we
I don't have
Americans,
time.
yeah, too late, huh? you know. So, but Americans have this naive, almost sense of that we're impervious to this stuff eroding the fabric of our communities. All we have to do is kind of like bring these folks in, and from my work in Mexico and Cambodia and Africa and those places, is that it's not a racial thing with me, that I'm not concerned about having people of color around me. That's not the problem. But what we're really seeing here is an erosion of our security in our own
Yes.
communities. And you texted me the other day about the affiliation of gangs now,
Mhm.
American gangs,
Mhm.
with the cartels. Speak a little bit about that.
Yes, this is playing out in many different ways on many different levels. And you're right. The average person is just kind of like, oh, that's awful going on down there, but it's too big for me.
Yeah.
We cannot look at it that way. We need to understand where we're at. You are absolutely right in that what has happened is that prior to this real time where we've had this large scale open border, 90% of our sex trafficking cases here in Southern California were gang related.
Wow.
And, they take their gang guys and they put them on the dating sites, and the girl falls in love on a dating site or at the mall. And the next thing you know, she's being forced out into commercial sex. But now
Mm-hmm.
those gangs have joined forces with the Mexican cartels.
Wow.
And what you're seeing is a level of violence in sex trafficking right here in our soil that we never saw before. Because this is all about using people, anybody that they can use, whether it's people who have come in that owe money to them, or people that they've been able to recruit from our own community. And so this level of violence in our trafficking has accelerated in ways we've never seen. In other words, you might have a pimp and maybe seven girls, and it's about making so much money a night, and
Hmm.
the pimp just wants to be wealthy. Now, this is cartel driven. It is about making millions of dollars any way they can. They do these organized retail thefts, they do home invasion robberies, they do commercial robberies, but they also run large scale sex trafficking rings. And these
Hmm.
victims now, instead of being able to just placate a pimp, are literally being used over and over and over, and all that money is being laundered back to the cartels. And so it's all about using people, any people they can use and violate. They don't care if they're American citizens or not. It's about using people to make billions of dollars and then making the cartel even bigger. And
Hmm.
so it has changed trafficking in a very big way right here in our communities. So you have people being brought in that are being held. You have people that are being brought in that are put into forced labor, and you have people that are being brought in that are being put out for commercial sex. And you also have our local gangs aligned with their cartels that are using our kids for sex trafficking income. So
Wow.
it permeates the entire society.
Yeah. I know that you're a good numbers person. and 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 yeah, there you go. But I want to talk a little bit about revenue streams, because I think that there's kind of almost like this and here again, it's a matter of kind of like breaking down stereotypes and kind of popular level thinking about these things versus really beginning to dig underneath and see what's going on in our communities, in our world. Is that with the cartels, that one revenue stream is human smuggling. That's getting people into America. But once people are in America, they have this debt bondage that they control people through, and that and revenue streams not only include sex trafficking, and you mentioned the other day about that it's not only sex trafficking of women but also of men.
Hmm.
You've seen more of that, but then we also have drug sales and drug trafficking. We have arms trafficking, and and you also say that the cartels are working with the gangs to do this retail theft stuff.
Hmm.
Just a little aside, I saw a guy at my post office, and this has been a couple of years back, is that in that he was selling socks out of the back of his van,
Uh-huh.
and they were all packaged socks,
Uh-huh.
retail socks at the post office, and that and he had literally a whole van full of socks
Hmm.
in the back. So he probably went into one of the smash and grab things, and he got stuck in the sock aisle. But we laugh about this. We got these smash and grabs, home invasion, but then it's not just what I was surprised too is that the cartels are not just engaged in illegal criminal activities,
Right.
but they're moving more and more into legal businesses. Talk a little bit not only about the revenue streams, both the illegal side of it, but also the legal
Yeah.
businesses.
This is a huge subject. I sometimes spend about a 4 hour training on it because I've studied money laundering and money laundering with cartels in a big way.
Hmm.
And it is mind boggling. You have to really understand how big this is. And that is my main concern. And as you and I have talked, yours too, because you say to yourself, these people are making billions. I mean,
Hmm.
billions and billions and billions of dollars from all kinds of activity. And I
Annually, yeah.
And I say to myself, this is going south of the border. We only live 90 miles from the border, you and I.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't live that far apart. But anyway, and, and they literally are, they're getting all kinds of drones with big guns on them. They're taking the money that they're making from trafficking our people and abusing our people. And the people who have arrived here are part of that. And they're sending that back. And suddenly you're seeing them very well equipped. You're seeing them with these huge guns and all kinds of weaponry. And the thing that I see there is they are making billions, and they're investing that in getting bigger and more powerful and more
Yeah.
dangerous to us.
Yeah.
We defund the police. And I
Oh, wow.
say, if there's ever a
Yeah.
time in our life, we ought to be funding law enforcement, number one, and number two, getting them technology. When you look at these gangs like MS-13 and the Transagua and all of those,
Yeah.
they have encryption, they have VPN, virtual private network.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I read and I believe was written by Peter Schweitzer, who I trust and believe in. He was saying one of the things that's happening is they're getting Glock switches brought in by the tens of thousands into the U.S. That makes any Glock into an automatic weapon. So what you're seeing is not only are they making millions and millions of dollars, but they're using it to get bigger, stronger, tougher, and permeate in the midst of our area of our society. Now, we were talking about the different ways that they make money. We're seeing lots right here in Southern California of these Venezuela and Argentina gangs, and they come in legally. They come in on tourist visas, and they stay about 30 days. And you'll see the pictures of them. There was a whole group of them taking place out in the eastern part of Riverside. And they will have like anywhere from 10 to 15 people. They plant cameras around your neighborhood. They know when you're going to be there or not. And the minute you leave, about 15 people come in, and in 3 minutes or less, they strip your home of everything they want.
Wow.
Now, these people do this for about 30 days, and then they get their tourist visas up and they go home. And they also get the people that are already here who owe them money to go out and do these massive retail thefts that you see like at Home Depot. By the way, I give our district attorney credit. He has got a law on the ballot. Part of the problem in California is we have this Proposition 47 and 57 that made retail theft under $950 a misdemeanor, so nobody cared. Well, now there's a bill on the ballot, folks, and on there that says if this is multiple retail thefts, then it's actually going to be a felony, and so that they can actually get more time. So some of it is political, quite frankly. There's a movement to let people out of prison early, not put them in prison, not do any bail, and so. But this actually enables these criminal activities in our own community. So on the one hand, you have to pay attention to what's going on in your community. On the other hand, you better know what's going on politically in your community. Be able to understand these bills and vote and make sure that you make a difference on them.
Yeah. I think that this is, okay, there's two things that that I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong. One is that I think that politicians have leveraged the American sense of compassion. And so, these poor people, and so they need this safe haven, but they don't get it when they come in because of debt bondage. So they leverage our sense of compassion, but also, and I know it's a touchy subject, but that if you don't embrace these folks, that you're a racist, because typically we don't see, people from England and Ireland coming across the Mexican border, and so it's this whole thing about that if you have concerns about people getting out of prison early, if you have concerns about folks standing on your street corners and selling flowers, or juice vendors or whatever else, it's because you're racist, and that and so I see that we're kind of caught in that bind. One is that we want to care about people who are who are legitimately oppressed. You give us, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to be free, type of thing. But we don't understand that we are just, all we are doing is victimizing these people further. When Go
It's
ahead.
it's an interesting subject, Carrie, because I was thinking this morning and reading the Bible. The Bible says something if you have two coats, will you give away one? And I
Yeah,
said, well, what if you have eight? Do you give away four or seven? And America is so wealthy. Even the
yeah,
poor, so the poor within the United States are more wealthy than others. The
hmm,
truth is I care deeply about people who come in here, and this is why I do what I do. I don't care if they come in legally or without documentation. If they're a human being, they need compassion, they need to understand, and we need to be able to assist any way we can. And by the way, trafficking has no respecter of persons.
exactly.
Certainly, they make a lot more money by trafficking young girls, but they traffic males, they traffic them, they traffic all types of people. It isn't about what race you are, what sexuality you are, what sexual preferences you are, what the color of your skin. It is about, can they exploit a human being and get the money? But here's the problem with all of that. When all of these people, over 10 million people, come into our society, we want to help the good ones, but there isn't like they wear some sort of sign that says I'm a good guy. You
Yeah.
can't tell which ones are good ones and which ones are free to go and which ones are being exploited and which
Hmm.
ones are cartel that are controlling the others. And that
Hmm.
is the problem with what has happened, especially in the political environment over the last few years. With an open border, here's the problem. We have, as a country, we should have a border control that weeds out, and the bad guys shouldn't get in, and that
Yeah.
should be on us to determine, is this a good guy or a bad guy? But when you open the border, everybody comes in. And it isn't until they commit a crime or they rise to the top or like that. So that has left the average person trying to protect themselves. And that takes away, first of all, our safety and the
Hmm.
safety of our children and the future of our children. So the real problem is that you're supposed to be vetted at a border. Every nation in the world asks to vet at the border, and otherwise they're not a nation. And
Hmm.
that is the problem, is they're now amongst us. So that is a challenge. Now in my case, I do a huge amount of public speaking. I try to be kind to everybody. Even if you're not documented, I want you to be safe. But the problem is, I don't know if you're being held against your will or you're not. And if you're stealing this because you owe money to somebody, or if you're running an illegal pot grow.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but this is important to me to say this at this point. So I'm going to go on a little left turn on you here.
Sure, that's
That,
fine.
that includes people from Southeast Asia and China.
Hmm.
We have right now that very few people are talking about, a lot of people coming in from China, and many of them come in on tourist visas and student visas and then just stay. And so you don't hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
But the Chinese, when they come in through the southern and northern borders, they're paying a huge amount of money, more than everybody else. If you come from Guatemala, it's usually 8 to 10,000 on the first time, and then they'll try to get another 5 or 6,000 after you get here from your
Hmm.
family. But if you're coming in from China, it can be 25 to 70,000.
Wow.
And the problem here is the Chinese have joined with the Mexican cartel, and I'm not making
Mm.
this up. I'm telling you that I have this information from probably 18, to make up a number, 18 different sources. It is common
Hmm.
knowledge now that about 2 years ago, the Chinese cartel took over the money laundering for the Mexican cartel. And
Wow.
it is very efficient. And what they do is they immediately take the fentanyl money, give it back to the Mexican cartel, who then works with the Colombian cartels to make more fentanyl and get more up here. But the Chinese will either do two things. They will either use their mirrored money laundering system, so that people that are working with them in China has the same amount of money, and that way the money that is illicit never crosses the border and it doesn't go in a bank. And they'll have a duplicate money system, so that within less than 24 hours, that drug money is turned over to either somebody in China or it is used to buy real estate here in the United States.
Huh.
And so what you're seeing is a massive amount of Chinese people buying real estate in the US with laundered money. Now, before I say that,
Mm-hmm.
that's nothing against Chinese people. I know a lot of them, and I love a lot of them. Okay, and they're just like me.
Yeah.
There's some real bad white blonde people out there committing crimes, and that doesn't
Yes,
have anything.
exactly. Exactly.
I don't want to nail it down to a particular race or ethnicity. However, the Chinese cartel is working with the Mexican cartel, and that money is in the millions, and it is being controlled right here in our community. My
Mm-hmm.
point is that we're on a one-way path. That the cartels are getting bigger, bigger, and bigger, and not just the Mexican cartels.
Yeah.
This is a global issue. While here we get more and more people, and many of them are being controlled and exploited by the cartels, but we don't know which ones. That's
Mm-hmm.
the problem with the system. Anytime you do away with all the rules, that leaves all of us in a situation of going, is this a good guy or a bad guy? Is it okay if my kids play down the street there at that house? You start to
Yeah.
change the way you look at this. So it is, this last few years has permeated our society and changed our lives completely. But that
Mm-hmm.
does not mean that we don't look out for our fellow man. And any chance I get to give away some extra clothes or things like that for people who are poorer than I am, then we need to do that. The Bible says to do that. I believe we need to do that.
Sure.
However, we also need to be smart in protecting our kids and helping our kids prepare for the future, because their future now is going to be completely different than anything we experienced.
Yeah. It's such a it's such a tragedy, and I believe. Okay, I'm just offering my personal opinion that this was completely unnecessary. It wasn't like there was some compelling human crisis that we needed to adjust our border policies. It was completely unnecessary. And as a result, that and I think that Americans are hopelessly naive on a lot of this. As a result, we have opened the doors to criminal activity and dark forces at work through these cartels and all, where we don't really understand. I don't think that the average person fully understands what direction that this is going.
It's an interesting thing to me. I talk about this on the radio show quite a bit, and is that we redefine crime. I mean, when
Mm-hmm.
you have a governor who says that my state will be a sanctuary state, okay,
Yeah.
we didn't vote on that. We didn't all raise our hand. Oh yeah, let's
Yeah.
rename this crime. Our governor took some of the criminal activity and said, "I'm going to decide this isn't criminal, and we're not going to enforce these
Yeah.
laws." And I talk about that on the radio about, it's kind of like redoing the Ten Commandments,
Yeah.
everybody wants to get rid of, thou shalt not commit adultery, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to steal.
Yeah.
And you redefine the
Yeah.
law. Whenever you start redefining the laws and you pick and choose which ones to enforce, you're going to have a breakdown of your society. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you ask me, I'd rather redefine the speeding law because I race a lot. You pick the wrong one, Governor. Let's do away with the speed limit,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Instead of redefining who is allowed to come across the border. But
Mm-hmm.
that is part of the problem here, is that our society's gone through and said, okay, you have to enforce this law, but not this one.
Yeah.
And the minute you do that, you have a breakdown in your society. And that is really true at the border, as we were saying, is that the
Mm-hmm.
real problem is that nobody is deciding who's the bad guy before they get in. And they're
Yeah.
here, and we're left to try to raise the next
Sort it
generation
out now.
of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're pushing a hard break here because I have another scheduled broadcast that's going to go out in just a few minutes. And so I would like for you just to kind of like wrap us up a little bit today, and then I will go from there. But I would like for you to just kind of share with us from your heart about what needs to happen and how people can get involved with Million Kids.
Well, what really needs to happen is we need to get back to being a country that has a rule of law. And the only way that you can really do that is be careful how you vote. Having said that, Million Kids is an agency that works with trafficking and social media exploitation, meaning online exploitation. And both of those, by the way, are impacted by foreign elements and people from the outside. But the main thing is to educate yourself and be involved and be smart about what you do. If you want to get an education, you can go to millionkids.org, sign up for our newsletter. We put out a weekly newsletter with all these cases on them, and we give a commentary with it so that you can get involved and know what to do with it. You can also go to millionkids.org and look at all of our website that we have there, all our videos, our radio shows, and all of that on there. But the name of the game is get involved, educate yourself, and know how to protect yourself and how to prepare your kids for that next generation, because it's going to be
Yeah.
completely different than the one you had.
Yeah, really. Yeah, unfortunately. So, thank you. I know you're an extremely busy person, and thank you for carving some time out from your schedule to be with us today. I hope that we could connect again and talk a little bit more about some of these topics.
You bet. Let's do it.
Yeah, all right. So, friends, I would like to just encourage you to check out Opal's website there at millionkids.org. And she is involved, like I say, she knows more about this than anybody I know, and that she's involved in training law enforcement. She understands both the legal, the criminal element of this, the money laundering side of it, and the political aspects of it better than anyone. And so I would encourage you to jump over to her website and at the very least, support her and their work financially. So thanks for watching. I hope